There it is. Okay, as Don said, welcome everyone to our Advanced Toastmasters online meeting. We are an Advanced Toastmasters club which supports Maverick leaders to have more impact by providing advanced feedback on leadership skills and discovering what it means to be an out-of-the-box, innovative leader. Today I chose a meeting theme of conflict because I think as Maverick leaders, we can expect to encounter conflict, but also as Maverick leaders, we definitely at times are going to create conflict because we have to take a position that isn't necessarily in line with what everybody's thinking so that we can achieve results that are greater than what the average person can do, especially as a team. So we always want to be aware of conflict and be able to handle it in a reasonable and thoughtful way that helps everybody find a win-win position. For our meeting, we still have a need for a general evaluator. Jim, oh, I see you're waving your hand. Thank you for volunteering.
Absolutely.
I'll just sign that up officially in the agenda, and then we'll move forward with everything. Jim. Today we have two speeches. One is a speech from the Communicating on Video manual by Andrea Sanger. Andrea, how long do you need for your speech?
It's 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay. And then we also have a short speech from Patricia O, who is running for a district officer position at her district council meeting on this coming Saturday. So she's going to practice her 1 to 2 minute speech. And what I'd like to have us do, particularly since this is a short speech, is take a little extra time and do a round robin evaluation so that we can give her more feedback on that to give her tips on how she might be able to win the election with, or at least impress the audience with that particular campaign speech. So be prepared to give her some feedback. Thanks. Moving along with our meeting, I would like to introduce our grammarian and counter today, one of our newest members, Sandy Yeager. So Sandy, please introduce your role. And if you've got a word of the day, please let us know. You can put it in the chat as well. Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. The word of the day is conflict. Conflict as a noun means to fight or warfare. It also means disagreement or discord. And as a verb, it means to be at odds. To use it in a sentence, I was conflicted at our conference that we held at work the other day, last week. And I will return it back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Sandy, for providing our word of the day. I hope that nobody has a conflict in how they use it. I'd now like to introduce our timer for the meeting to tell us about the times and how she's going to show us how our speech progresses. So please welcome Donna Sarah.
Thank you, Doug. And as your timer today, I will be evaluating, or not evaluating, but timing all the speeches and the table topics. So when you get to the point where you are at the green, I will put the green. So if you're speaking and you're at 5 minutes, I'll put this up. Table topics for 1 minute, I'll put it up. Yellow and red. So you will see all of these during the timing of your speech. Please make sure that I'm highlighted in your bar at the top when it is time for you to speak so you can see me. Thank you. Back to you, Doug.
Thank you, Don, for explaining the timer's role. Now we move right to the speeches, and our first speaker is Patricia O. Patricia gives me her introduction. She says, I'm going for election for District Public Relations Manager in Cork on the 12th of May. I need to sell myself to the District Council to get votes. Feedback and suggestions is greatly appreciated with my speech. This is a 2-minute speech at the district council meeting. She also has a speech for the district showcase on Friday, so tips on that in the evaluation would be appreciated. To present her speech, Yes, I Can. Please welcome Patricia O'Connell.
Mr. Toastmaster, I have been in Toastmasters over 10 years and a dual member of both Limerick Toastmasters and Toma Toastmasters. And I've been actively involved with the PR in the Limerick Riverside Conference team when it was staged in Limerick 2 years ago. Professionally, I am qualified as an accountant with qualifications both in marketing, multimedia and communications. I found my journey through Toastmasters very rewarding, both in communication and leadership. Because at the end of the day, it's the members that we meet along the way that makes the journey worth the effort. I have experienced having served as area director and division B director. And the journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. I believe in interaction and communication between clubs, areas, divisions, and the district to work towards the integrity, service, and excellence of our mission. I have attained my DTM in July 2016, and I'm currently a Pathways Ambassador. And I believe in mentoring. I'm also mentoring members within my area and neighbouring areas. And I would like to introduce, if elected, webinar training and other online training facilities for training on the website, Facebook pages, and LinkedIn. And also website page construction for every club within our district. And also facilities for website promotion, as well as Google Analytics and search engine optimization. A PR team virtual library to be set up with PDF reading, as well as video material for access by all clubs within District 71, as well as peer-to-peer virtual mentoring facility for social media. So, to round it up, I'm asking you to give me your vote and to consider the 3 C's of public relations: to create, coordinate, and to communicate. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Patricia, for letting us know your campaign there. I think that we'll be able to give you plenty of feedback in the evaluation, and good luck on the campaign.
Thank you.
Next, we have Andrea Sanger, who is doing an interview for the Communicating on Video manual. She is working on her Advanced Communicator Silver Award. Today she is working from the Communicating on Video book, When You're the Host. She will be interviewing Rabbi Richard Weiner. Since Rick is not asking to be evaluated for this speech, it will run 5 to 7 minutes only, with no audience participation time. Please welcome Andrea Sanger.
Thank you, Doug. Tonight we're going to talk to this morning. We're going to talk to Rick about something we don't know much about of him. I am excited. We know him as a really good speaker. We know him as a rabbi, but did you know he's also a very accomplished clarinet player? Rick, when did you start playing your clarinet?
That's a very interesting story, Andrea. What happened was, in the public schools, they always send in the people to demonstrate the instruments and who would like to try. They start at 4th grade. Well, in 4th grade, I went running home and said to my mother, "Mom, can I take an instrument?" She said, "No." 5th grade, I did it again. And she said, "No, you won't stick with it." 6th grade, I begged. And they acquiesced. From 6th grade on, I've been playing the clarinet. According to my mother, I won't stick with it, but I'm still there.
So about how long is that now? Just a few years?
That's in the 60s, my dear.
Well, what kind of schooling did you take for clarinet? I understand you are very advanced in this area.
That was my first love. Music was absolutely my first love. I took weekly lessons right through high school, and I ended up going to Boston Conservatory of Music to be a music teacher. However, I decided that teaching was not a way to make money, so I didn't pursue that career, but I still play professionally.
What would you say is your greatest accomplishment in playing?
The love of music. Every single time I get off stage, I'm flying high. It doesn't matter whether I'm playing at a small park or at the Esplanade in Boston. Wherever the venue is, when I get off stage, I am fulfilled. And I think that's a major accomplishment.
So have you ever had any conflict when you're playing your clarinet with other players or conductors or anyone else? And how did you handle that?
I think that's an amazing question, and something that I've experienced with other professional musicians. We totally respect each other. There's something I taught my wife that I learned at the conservatory, and she refers to it quite frequently. When a musician makes a mistake, when something is going on, and there's only one alto clarinet player, for example, the conductor doesn't say, "Rick, you missed that note." It's alto clarinet section. We're not pointing out the individual, even if there's only one musician in that role. We're being more generic to offer everybody the proper respect. I can honestly say I don't remember a single conflict that I've had in my professional musician career.
That's amazing. That's great. What was the best venue that you've ever played in?
I mentioned it a few seconds earlier. I think one of the most beautiful venues in the world is on Boston Common at the Esplanade. Every July 4th, the Boston Pops does their famous concert there, and they do the 1812 Overture with the cannons. I've played there. The venue is absolutely gorgeous. It's along the water. You have thousands of people in the audience. Beautiful place to be, and I look forward to performing there.
Do you have any future gigs, whatever you would call it, in the clarinet world?
As a matter of fact, last week I got my email contracting me for another half dozen concerts this summer. The June 12th, we have our one rehearsal for the year. And then we start June 26th. I'll be playing every Tuesday at an outside venue. The band that I play with, mostly collegiate musicians as well as stage musicians. So there's a lot of talent. When I say collegiate, I mean collegiate instructors, not college students. A lot of fantastic talent there. And I always say to them, "Why are you hiring me?" But we have a great time together.
You must be very good. That's why they're hiring you. If you're playing in those places, I'm betting you're still pretty good. You're better than most of us, right? Go ahead.
No. What were you going to say?
I just lost it there just a sec. Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Well, what I was going to say is, in my heyday when I was younger and playing 2-3 gigs a week, my proficiency was superior to what it is today, but I still hold my own.
Well, thank you for letting us know that and getting to know you. Is there anything else you'd like to add to your interview that I haven't asked you yet?
As a profession, I am a rabbi. I deal with people. That doesn't mean that I can't follow my own true heart in following my first love, that is a musician. I don't make a living doing that. I play I make gas money, basically. Half a dozen concerts, whatever it is, I make a little stipend. But always follow your dream. Because when you follow your dream, you'll never, ever regret it. And that's my final word.
Thank you so much for the interview today. I'm glad we got to know about your clarinet playing. And, if I'm in Boston and you're playing, I'll come and listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Doug.
Thank you, Andrea, for doing a great interview with Rick Weiner. And thank you, Rick, also for telling us a bit more about yourself. That was really interesting. Now we come time for our impromptu speaking section for the meeting, our table topics session. And to lead our table topics is Pamelah Landers. Please welcome Pamelah.
Thank you. Today our theme is conflict, and we've heard it defined and shared. I'm going to be asking questions of you related to conflict on multiple different areas of life. I'm going to start with a Toastmasters question, and I'm going to start with Sandy as our first speaker. In Toastmasters, if you're in your home club, if there's conflict and you're in a leadership position, how do you approach handling the conflict?
Thank you, Madam Table Topic Master. Well, technically, I am homeless. I don't have a home club at this moment. But when I did have a home club, I actually had a few of them. I used to belong to 3 clubs. And we all had dual memberships in each of these clubs because they were rather small. And there was conflict at occasion. And how we would handle it would be the executive committee, the executive officers would meet during our officer meeting, and we would discuss what the conflict was with just between us. And then when we had opened the meeting up to all club members, then we would go ahead and just discuss the conflict if it needed to be discussed that way. Otherwise, it would just be a one-on-one, and usually included a mentorship. How can this person's mentor assist this person with this conflict? So if it was a conflict with another Toastmaster, or if it was a conflict about not following the guidelines of the evaluations, because sometimes there's a fine line on if you allow a person to go through with their speech and say that this speech met all the guidelines or not, or if it was in regard to, well, the person gave the speech and they gave it their best shot, so they should get credit for it anyway. So there's all those types of conflicts, but usually it was within the executive club meeting or executive officer meeting, and then if it needed to be taken to all the membership, it was, but usually it was between the member and the mentor of that individual member. Thank you, Madam Table Topic Master.
Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to Doug for our next question. Doug, in a work environment, and you're a maverick leader, meaning you're trying to create things that are outside the box or not in the usual path, what happens in a conflictual way? How do you manage it when you're sure your idea is the best and other people aren't buying into it and there's conflict about it?
Thank you, Pamelah. How do I manage a conflict situation like that at a work environment? Well, I think first I'd have to stop to consider exactly what the other opinion is. I might think that I'm right, but if I'm not open to understanding the other side of the argument, that can lead to a bigger problem. But let's say that I still feel, so I've I've stopped, I've thought about it, I've considered the different options and say, no, I insist as the leader here that this is the path we need to do. I have to then persuade and give the logic behind my decision in a way that communicates that to everyone else so that they can see why I'm making those choices. Now, I'd hope that I can communicate that in such a way that people understand my point of view, where I'm coming from, and can see why I think that this particular choice, although a conflicting choice from the opinion, the main opinion, is the better option. And if I can't show that the choice that I'm making is going to lead ultimately to better results, well, then we have to find a better way to resolve the conflict overall. And that would be the subject for, well, a longer topic. Back to you, Madam Tabletop.
Thank you very much, Doug. Jim, you have a son, and I'm sure that there have been conflicts because especially a teenager who knows everything thinks their parents are all screwed up and don't know anything. My question for you is, as a parent, how, as in one example, for instance, that you feel good about, how have you handled conflict with your son?
That's a challenging question. Thank you very much for it. I have a lot of examples running through my mind, but I don't think any of them are probably great examples. I've learned along the way. I think one of the worst things I ever did to my son was taking his door off, literally taking his door off after he'd slammed it about 15 or 20 times in the course of a week. I literally put it in the other room, and it was just awful how terribly affected he was. And I felt terrible. Still feel terrible to this very day. Conflicts, my personality is one that's a little bit less passive, maybe type B type personality. I really think conflicts in the heat of the moment are just a waste of time to try to take the higher ground. So conflicts, to me, the delay game to have a conversation later is usually the best way, not a timeout. I actually put myself in timeout now. That's basically my rule of thumb. If I have a conflict with my son, and I remember this from when my dad would get mad at me, a Vietnam veteran that would actually bite his tongue and turn super red as he held me against the wall while he was deciding what to do, which was the most terrifying thing in the world. And I love my dad. He never did anything wrong. But to take that moment in the heat of a conflict and to find a way to stretch it out, count to 10, come back to it 30 seconds later, a minute later, even 2 or 3 hours later is what I've decided through the course of my life as a father as the best course of action to dealing with conflict. Because it's amazing after the heat of the moment is over, how receptive everyone can be, and the second thoughts that even my son would have. And by giving him that room, because I need the room even still at the age that I'm at, by just giving him that room, even though we might have stormed away with me thinking that he was wrong, he comes back with rationales and logic I may not agree with all the time, but it becomes a discussion and not a conflict. So I think drawing it out so that the conflict becomes a discussion, I think, is the thing that I apply now in life. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that answer. All right, Rick. You're muted. As a Maverick leader, because you're in this group, I'm assuming you're attracted to Maverick leadership. And you're a rabbi, so I'm sure that there is all kinds of opportunity for growth in the rabbi field with people. How do you handle conflict in your working environment as a rabbi when conflict comes up and people don't see your viewpoint or they don't understand your perception of reality?
Thank you, Pamelah. That's an excellent question. One of the reasons why I do what I do, I am not a pulpit rabbi. I work independently. One of the reasons is I don't like politics and I don't like conflict. So if there's something that doesn't feel right to me, I have a right to speak my mind and make it work. what's more up to the point is when I'm dealing with other people that are involved in conflicts. And one of the ways I counsel on that is I just suggest that people listen to each other. Most conflicts are because we don't listen. We learn to listen in Toastmasters through evaluations, listening to somebody's speech so we can evaluate it. People in the real world often don't listen. They have their own viewpoint, and that's what they focus on. By teaching other people to stop and listen, we're eliminating a lot of conflict. Therefore, I find for myself, if I'm listening to others, hearing their point of view, even if it's not what I agree with, I can often compromise, accept their viewpoint. I won't tolerate their viewpoint because I feel that that's just an excuse to not agree. I will either accept it or I won't accept it, but if I do, I make sure that the conflict is resolved in either way, either by discussing with somebody or finding a way to acquiesce. Madam Topics Master.
Thank you very much, Rick. Andrea, in your having spent many years in a church environment, I'm sure that there were people who thought that the pastor should be doing things differently than how the pastor was doing things. And being the wife of the pastor, I'm sure that you've had to hear things or be in relationship in some way with conflict related to maybe having to choose between a viewpoint of your husband and a viewpoint of a parishioner. So can you give us any examples or stories about how you've dealt with that, if in fact that did happen?
Thank you, Pamela. Yes, it did happen quite a bit. That was a pretty normal, everyday occurrence in our life for many years. My husband and I are vastly different. In fact, I would say we are the example of opposites attract. He is an extreme extrovert and I am an extreme introvert. And he loves to talk on the fly. He thinks out loud, and I love to take my time and think about things and then have a discussion about it. So we constantly were having conflict as he would just start blathering to people about a variety of things. And I would be thinking, that's a bad thing to say. They're going to be mad at you. And indeed, they would get mad and they would come to me and tell me that he has just said something wrong. So I would have to very kindly say, well, I'm really not the person you want to talk to. If you didn't like what he had to say, then you need to go and talk to him, not me. And that's pretty much how I handled conflict with the pastor. If people didn't like what the pastor was doing or what somebody else was doing, I would refer them back to that person that I did not get in the middle of it, because I don't like to be in conflict with people, and I don't want to be the person that actually adds more to the conflict. And that's what would happen if I'd gotten in the middle of it. Back to you, Pamela.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. Yes, we're hearing lots of options about how to handle conflict, which I'm so appreciating. Patricia. In a Toastmasters group, since that's mostly what I know about you at this point, in your home club Toastmasters group, when you are disagreeing with the vice president of education, because you're the president, right?
Right.
You're disagreeing with the vice president of education about a particular program or meeting, how do you handle that conflict, if that's ever come up?
Well, I'm lucky. I have a very good working relationship with my VP at the moment. Normally what we do is, if we're going to run a program within the club, we decided to run Speechcraft and we wanted to reach out into the local community. So I had my ideas and my VPE had his ideas. So what I suggested was that we met up privately outside of the Toastmasters environment and we went for a coffee and we relayed the ideas and we listened to what each other had to say. And then I accepted some of what he had to say. He accepted some of what I had to say. And by doing that, we were able to amalgamate. We came to a win-win situation where we amalgamated some of my ideas and some of his ideas. And we dropped some of my ideas and dropped some of his. So that was what we went for. But I think the most important thing is to be able to listen. And I think that once the other person feels that you listen to them, then you can bring them on board. Madam Topics Master.
Thank you, Patricia. Erin, are you up for doing table topics today? I can't hear you or see you, Erin, so I don't know if that's a yes or no.
Aaron just posted to chat that he is at a meeting with a friend. He's AFK.
Oh, okay, so he can't. Okay, thank you. All right, Dawn. As you are, and when you were working on your high performance leadership project, and there were things that you were feeling internally conflicted about, how did you handle that conflict with yourself?
Oh, thanks for asking this question, Pamelah. This is the conflict that gets me the most, is that internal conflict. And it's an ever evolving lesson that I learn and deal with. However, I'm used to dealing with that on my own. When I was doing the high performance leadership program with Pamelah and Andrea, I was required to ask for help in ways that I never thought I would need help. And also having myself be seen in conflict and having these great leaders asking me, what's that about? Tell me more. And really helping me get to that place of giving myself permission to not have all the answers and giving myself permission to be in conflict. Because I think a lot of times for myself, when I'm in that internal conflict, I think it's wrong. Like, I need to be happy all the time. I mean, it's been a long, long journey for me to get to a place where I understand that I don't always need to be happy. It's very valid for me to go through my inner conflict, because at the end of it, I have so much more self-awareness about myself, about everybody else. And, but in that situation within the high performance leadership, I had to ask for help. So that's the way I know how to deal with it, so I don't kind of self-implode. So with that, I will just give it back to you, Pamelah, and say thanks for asking that question.
You're welcome. One of the experiences I'm having in listening to everybody share today is that we all have our own way, which is totally how we're designed, right? Everybody's unique. Have your own way. And all of you seem to have some value that you've learned over time about how to handle conflict. And I appreciate that some of it has to do with listening, because as leaders, that's one of our greatest roles. So I'm going to ask we still have a few more minutes to do this. I'm going to ask another question that anybody can feel free to answer, even though everybody's participated. Using listening as a tool, because that was a common thread, as a maverick leader to handle conflict, what kind of listening tools have you had to develop in order to be good at listening? Because it's not everybody's skill set. What have you learned about the listening process? Anybody want to share? Jim?
I'll make it very quick. The thinking hats, if you recall, a lot of you might, there's these 6 thinking hats. They're colored hats. It's a way to discern different types of thought, and I have applied that to the 6 different types of thinking. I'd love to share that with the club at some point, but there are multiple ways of thinking, just as there are multiple ways of listening. So I have acquired a talent for empathic listening, or subjective listening, and critical listening. It follows along the same lines as the 6 thinking hats, which is something we can talk about later. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else learned about the process of listening that they want to share? Rick, you're muted.
I think some of the greatest challenge in listening is judgment. And I work really hard at not judging other people's thoughts, because once somebody speaks and we feel judgment there, we predetermine what's going to be happening. So just ignore that and let go of the judgment, and then we can listen more effectively. At least that works for me.
Great, thank you. I know something for me that I've learned over time. I generally am a really good listener, but I have times when I want to cut people off when they're not done speaking, and having to discipline myself to not do that, or sometimes intentionally interrupting them if they're on a stream of conversation that I feel like is a spiral down. Sometimes I will choose to just, especially in a coaching session or with my super close friends, but not cutting people off, letting them complete their conversation, even if they're going on and on and on. Sometimes it's important to just let them think out loud until they get to a conclusion that feels right, or I'm clear that it's right. So I think that's been, for me, an important conversation, is not cutting people off when they're talking and really listening. Any other insights on that about listening? Sandy.
During the conference that we held here in Grand Island last week, one of our presenters, Dr. Alan Berger, was speaking on emotional sobriety. And one of the activities that the participants had to do was watch this video on receptive listening and being able to question and interview the clients. But one of the key elements of that was actually to listen for what wasn't being said, because what usually isn't said and brought up is the true issue, and being able to confront that issue and bring it up to the individual to be able to discuss that subject and find ways and alternative ways to be able to handle it.
Brilliant, thank you, Sandy. Yeah, what's not being said? What's the real truth that wants to be said? I can't remember his name at the moment. There's a very famous publisher and therapist who did the Imago Method, who would, one of the things he does is teach people to say, is there anything else while you're listening? Is there anything else? Is there anything else? And I find when that's done with me, that it takes me probably, used to be a long time now, less time, to get down to what the real core issue. But the fact that somebody's asking that gives me permission to keep going deeper, because they're still listening and they're still interested and they still want to know the truth. And I find that to be very, very powerful listening tool. Is there anything else? And not sharing your opinion until everything else is feeling complete, and having the person say, okay, that's it, I'm complete. That's everything I want to share. Very powerful listening tool. Okay,
Well,
we have one more. Yeah.
We are actually out of time for tabletop.
Okay, great.
Particularly since we want to do a bit of extra time on the evaluation for Patricia. So, sorry, I do have to cut you off. I'd now like to move along to our general evaluator, who will handle the evaluation portion of the meeting. So please welcome Jim Adams.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it, Doug. I would like to go ahead and do the non-round robin evaluation first, if I may. That way we have a better understanding of where our time lies, and maybe we can fill it up to the maximum for talking about Patricia's speech. So I would like to quickly turn it back over to Pamelah to give the evaluation, unless this has changed.
It has. I'm evaluating Andrea, and Dawn is evaluating Patricia.
Right, but I'm asking that we're going to be doing a round robin with Patricia first.
Oh, so we're going to start with Andrea then.
Right,
okay.
Right. So I'd like to ask that Pamelah does that evaluation first.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. All right, Andrea. Number 3, from the video manual, hosting an interview. So the purpose of this was to appear as a host on a simulated talk show with another club member serving as a guest, and to conduct the interview with questions and a smooth flow of conversation. That was the practice of this, is to have that, and questions based on the expertise of the guest of a predetermined subject. So I appreciate that you brought us to Rick, a part of Rick's life that we knew nothing about yet, and that was fascinating to hear about his passion of being a clarinet player and learning a lot about how he's still actively multiple years later doing that. So thank you for bringing us a very interesting content on one of our club members. I think you were prepared, Andrea. There was one place where it felt when you said, can you tell us about future gigs or whatever you would call it, to, instead of using the whatever you would call it, I think as a professional host, you probably wouldn't say that phrase. You probably would have just used the phrase, would you talk with us about your future events or your future gigs, whatever you had learned would be the thing. So that's the only place that I saw where the question didn't feel really smooth to me. And there was another place where you just lost track of what you were doing, I think. I'm not sure. So I would recommend that you have notes or written questions down that you could follow in case something happens. On TV, they usually have teleprompting things available if that's been prepared. So having some kind of written note so that you wouldn't have lost track of where you were and could have just been smooth about it. So that, but mostly it was really smooth, and it was interesting and fascinating to learn. One of the questions in here was about using gestures related to be on video. I didn't see any gestures, so there was nothing that was interfering with things. You weren't putting your hand over your face or anything like that, and I know you're very conscious of that. So I would say that the gestures there wasn't a need for gestures, and so consequently, that part of it was really well done. You did seem confident and relaxed and enjoying the interview, and as a person who's looking as an on-viewer, I want the host to be enjoying the interview. That makes me feel more comfortable and relaxed as a viewer. So that was well done. And I appreciate that you did that. And the other thing, would you be effective as a speaker on a real talk show? I think with a little more rehearsal with notes in front of you or some cue cards or something, that yes, because your enthusiasm is totally there, and that's really necessary. So, good job, Andrea. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Pamela. Very well done. All right. So what we want to do is a round robin. I would love to hear after this meeting the different variations of round robins that you guys do in your particular clubs. One of the things that I would like to do today is, and this happens in our club, one person might start, but then they talk for the entire duration of the time that we've allotted for round robin. So I'd like to really round robin this with 1 point as we go around, and we'll have time to go for a second point. So it's going to be rapid fire. So focus on one thing that you want to share, that you really want to convey to Patricia, and then cut it short, keep it 20, 30 seconds, and then we'll hopefully we can circle back and do this for a certain period of time. I'm not sure what that certain period of time is. I'm going to go ahead and ask the timer to give us at least a 5-minute green card so we kind of know where we're at. If we could do that, but then also defer and ask Dawn Nocera to kick it off, since she was going to be the evaluator for the speech, and let her start the round robin, and we'll share our thoughts. So, Dawn.
Let me unmute myself. So, yeah, Patricia's speech was, and I'm guessing that she came to this meeting prepared to read off of her read and let us know, allow us to give her feedback on the content more than the stage presence, because that feels like what she's going to work on. I mean, so I'm making a big assumption there, but I'm assuming that that's the case. So the content I felt was very good. I enjoyed the fact that she gave us a lot of credibility, a lot of her background to give us credibility of why she feels like she's qualified to be in this position for her district. And I guess that's my one point, and I will say pass at this time.
Thank you. Andrea Sanger, would you share with us your thoughts about Patricia's speech?
I too thought the content was really good, but I would want to say to you, Patricia, I would vote for you because of all the things that you've done and all the things that you want to do. But as you're presenting it, I would work hard on reading it multiple times to yourself so you're really familiar with it, so you don't get stuck in the middle. Because I think that will deter from all of the great things that you could bring to that position. Back to you.
Thank you. How about Rick? Would you share us your thoughts, and then Sandy after Rick?
There we go. I would suggest watching the filler words, and that goes along with the last comment of practicing, because there were quite a few filler words in there. And also, when I spoke with Patricia before, I suggested to her to ask for the vote. Ask, ask, ask. Well, she did ask, but just once at the very end. I think that if you really want to win the election, I'm asking for your vote for Vice President, for Public Relations Officer, because I hold these qualifications. And then at the end, again, ask for the vote. You can never ask too many times. People will hear that and vote for you.
Thank you. Sandy?
Hi, I would actually prefer that you not list your qualifications or what you would like to do. Instead, I would like for you to turn it into a mini table topic speech. So as an example, you could say, this is what I would like to do in this role using my past experience, such as, and then grab something from that list. But I would prefer not to hear, I'm qualified because of this, 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 and this, and then this, 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 and this is what I would like to do.
Thank you. Doug, how about you? Your thoughts, and then Pamela.
I actually quite like what Sandy just had to say, that I think focusing a bit more on what you're going to do for the district and then using your qualifications or stating them to say how I can accomplish that is a very good thing. The one point I want to ask, actually I want to ask the timer quickly. Dawn, what was the time for that speech? Because she had 1 to 2 minutes, and in a district meeting, they get cut off at 2 minutes.
Oh, well, her speech was 2 minutes and 21 seconds.
So there's a time issue that, Patricia, you definitely want to work on. Although I think, Dawn, you raised the yellow card at 2 minutes, so...
that was my fault. I was a little bit off because I forgot that she was doing a shorter speech. So.
Okay. But in that case, yeah, definitely watch out for the time, but I don't think we had good practice for you being able to do that right this time, Patricia. Overall, though, I did like what you had to say, and I liked what you are planning to do for the district in terms of webinar training, virtual libraries on how clubs can utilize public relations better. Back to you.
Great. And Pamela, your thoughts?
I would like to have you not read a speech at all, but share with confidence your vision. Like both Doug and Sandy were saying, is how you can, what's in it for them, what's in it for the district, and why you're confident. I want to feel confidence from you. That's the most important thing I want, is to feel confidence from you about why you can fill this role. But I prefer that you didn't read it. I prefer you just spoke it. That's my preference.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And my only comment, and it really doesn't apply to what you shared with us, but the thing that came into my mind, pretending that I was there in the audience, seeing that you were giving this speech, with the itemized list, I would love to have seen, even if it was on the screen, a little bit of the gestures about the things that you're going to share. So I would suggest that when you are up there, that you take advantage of the fact that you're going to be in front as we all are really in the real world, and practice some of the gestures that you might, especially when you're talking about enumerating the concepts that you were sharing. So those are my thoughts. Does anyone else have a burning desire to share another comment about something for Patricia before we move on? Yes, Pamela.
One more thing, Patricia. When you're reading, it's hard to have eye contact with the audience. And the eye contact is the thing that I think will engender them to trust you. And that's why I would prefer that you speak it instead of read it.
All right. Doug, and then we'll go to Sandy.
One minor little point. I noticed early in your speech you said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Not only do I think that's a cliche, I didn't really see the single steps that you would use that line to exemplify. So I think I would avoid using that at all.
All right, Sandy.
Another point, well, I'm actually a little confused on her timing because I know that she asked for 2 minutes here, but she did mention earlier that she would have 7 minutes. So I'm not exactly sure if this is happening during the business meeting at the conference or if this is something that's added as value to the conference to interview, giving a 5 to 7 minute speech for all candidates to be able to speak. So I'm a little questioning on that. And in that regard, if she truly only has 2 minutes, Patricia, I would like for you to find the one thing that you truly feel needs to be worked on and share how you're going to improve that. And then if you do have 5 to 7 minutes, then I would choose the 3 things, the top 3 things that you would change.
All right, thank you very much. So we're at 7 minutes, and I think that's a pretty well-rounded round robin for the evaluation. Good luck, Patricia. And if there's an opportunity, we're here. If you want to share or bounce off any of their ideas through our social media or through the email. As far as the general evaluation portion, I'll keep mine short. I know we're running short on time. I do want to ask for the evaluation or for the counter grammarian and timer in just one moment. I want to focus my general evaluation on one portion of the meeting that initially I guess I got off on the wrong foot because of a preconceived notion here in the group that we are as Mavericks, and that is with Pamelah's table topics, where she announced the person's name before she actually asked the question. Now, I've changed my tune in the course of this meeting because of 2 things. One is, this is something that I've been ingrained in my mind from my own club, is to keep everyone on the edge, have the question asked, then ask someone, because it keeps them more engaged. But the thing that I like about it here is, we've got this extra step where we have to unmute ourselves. And I think by offering the name out first gives us the opportunity to get into the proper posture, if you will. But I wouldn't recommend that we wait for the pause like Pamelah was doing for the mute button to disappear. I think just by announcing our name, going in straight with the question, we're already going to be, getting ourselves taken care of. It would have been a lot smoother, and I don't mind the concept at all. I'll leave it to everyone else as far as announcing the name first. And lastly, something I'd love for us to continue to do is after the table topics, this platform to expound on the concepts that we're sharing in table topics as kind of an open, let me talk table topics section, I think is a really interesting thing that we should probably consider doing more often. So that's my evaluation of the meeting in proper. I thought Pamelah's evaluation was solid. I do like the focus on the enjoyment, the way we look and are portrayed on the screens across. I thought was a very valid concept. I think the round robin went well. I don't have anything else outside of that really to say. So I'll ask for let's do the timers report if we could.
Thank you, Jim. I'm just going to say with the timers report that everybody was on time, except for if they're going to do the 2 minutes only for Patricia's speech. We'd have to pull her off the stage because she was only 20 seconds over. But that's my timers report. Back to you, Jim.
All right, great. And then how about the counter grammarian report?
In regards to the all counters reports, I will fill out a sheet and I'll email that to the club. In regard to the grammarians report, there are some things that I noticed. Andrea, you used the word of the day 3 times. Dawn, you used the word of the day 4 times. Rick, you used the word of the day 3 times, Pamelah 10 times, but you have an advantage over us as table topic master. Jim, you used the word of the day 3 times, and I used the word of the day 1 time. Also, I had noticed that I stumble over my words, and Dawn, you had done that as well a few times. Rick, I noticed that at one point in time you started a sentence with lot of instead of using a lot of. Pamelah, you said in your many years, asking a question to Rick instead of in the many years that, I'm sorry, that was at a table topic question. And then, Doug, I noticed that when you think, you draw out the word that you're on. And so if you could pay attention to that a bit more. It's just because wherever you stop, whatever word it is that you stop on, and then you stop and think, that word just tends to be a little bit longer. And one thing I noticed about the club was it's hard to return the lectern back to the topic master or return the lectern back to Toastmaster because there really is no lectern in this club. But I noticed that we all say, back to you, Doug. And I'm not sure, it sounds like we're on the radio or on TV, in my opinion, during an interview. So I don't know if that's just something that's part of club climate in this club, but that was something that I noticed. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Sandy. Very good. Very observant. One last thing before I turn it over to the Toastmaster. And Sandy, I know you can't see what you look like, but your image, when you go to talk, your screen turns into your name. And I didn't understand why that is. And for a moment there were 2 of you, which was interesting. But I just wanted you to know that we're seeing that just because we're all playing with technology. So not a bad thing, not a good thing. Just wanted to share that feedback with you. That's all I have. I'd like to go ahead and have our Toastmaster of the day continue for the conclusion of the meeting. Doug.
Thank you, Jim, for handling our evaluation section. And Jim, for your information, Sandy was having serious issues with networking and lag, so the video was cutting in and out, and sometimes I think she was deliberately turning off the video in order to just have the audio come through better.
I see. Good.
Yeah, I think that we've had a great meeting here today. Fortunately, we've managed to avoid conflict for this meeting. And I would like to turn the meeting now over to our president to handle the roles for next week, or I guess really I will close the meeting at this point, and then we can do the roles for next week following that. So thank you, everybody, and I will close the meeting.
I love that you have a gavel. That makes me so happy, Doug.
Gavel.
This was actually